Okay, so we've got a pretty functional effect, right? We've got our simulated smoke and fire. We have our hand-painted little flash and some texture to our mysterious embers. We've got a mesh for rocks that we duplicated, one that has collision and one that's kind of teeny tiny. And we stuck a light on it. It works pretty well in the game, except for one gigantic issue that we haven't set up correctly if we were to submit this for final publication in the game, right? Which is that our effect is still looping. So let's just go and turn that off. I guarantee at some point in your life, you're going to think you're done and you're going to forget to turn this off because you've been working on it looping. So just always remember, we need to make this safe for shipping.
Alternatively, hear me out. We set the loop duration or we set it to something like really, really long so that it just like surprise pops at you at some distant point after you've activated the effect.
It's funny you should say that because in the last episode, we talked a little bit about optimization and performance.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things is that the effect is really still on and processing, not doing much, but still on and processing this Niagara system for as long as this duration still is running. So if we did go in here and leave it to like once, but set this to 5,000 or 6 hours, this Niagara system will just be ticking away in the background for 6 hours. So we want to try to trim these. It's not, again, it's not a huge overhead, so I don't care if our effect lasts 3.5 seconds, not 5, but you don't want to go too wasteful with it. Mm-hmm. Let's just test it one more time, make sure that we're still happy with it and that it feels good, and then, yeah, that's working.
Looks nice.
So now, one of the things that I always do, and I feel like there's a therapist out there that's going to claim that this leads to a lot of insecurities, but I always challenge myself, if I could do this again, what could I do better? Or if I had more time, what would I change? And so, Julian, what is it that you think we should do differently if we were to try and start all this over again?
That's a good question. I don't
Criticize it.
From my perspective, I'm pretty happy with it. I don't know. What are you seeing? Because I think your eye's a little bit more trained in this sense.
I mean, I think, first of all, we're not really motivating this, right? Like, we are shooting blue squares and we are hitting a fiery, gassy, brown explosion.
It's true.
With rocks. And so I think that we would want to make sure this actually fits the original source motivation. If, for whatever reason, that was a explosive barrel that we were shooting with our Nerf ball and causing it to explode, there's a couple small things that I am noticing. So we have a lot of different colors in the hotspot. So if you look at this, the yellow of our flash is actually a little bit green, but our fire is a little bit red. That's a really subtle thing, but it does bother me. And I think that the more we lock all those different elements together, they're going to fuse more. And I won't be able to spot that that was the greenish yellow flash and the reddish yellow fireball. And so I'd want to go in and just pay a little more attention to the colors. I also am a big fan of more stuff, especially in explosions. Like, those rocks added quite a bit, right? Why don't we get some dirt and some finer particulate up in the air? Why don't we have some fire left on the ground and a scorch mark left behind wherever this actually exploded? Why don't we destroy the blue box, right? Like, there's so many more things that we would want to do. And that's just for artistic integrity here. The truth is that we took a lot of shortcuts. We took a lot of liberties to make sure that this is a really just fun, positive first effect that we were making.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we wanted this to be a real valuable production asset for a modern, let's say high-end, so AAA video game, there's some things that we did really poorly. So for example, lighting. We chose to not take into consideration lighting at all on our effect, which means that if this explosion happens over here in, I'm going to say over here in shadow, it is the same color as over here in sunlight. And that smoke really, like, smoke is very heavily lit. The way smoke looks is because of shadow information. And so there's a gigantic subject around lighting that we would need to take into consideration. I am happy with the randomness, and so I think we totally got away with using a flipbook, but maybe at the end of this, you can start to see that the smoke is still a little bit too low resolution, and it's not fading out in a very satisfying way. So I'd love to see if we could get the smoke living longer and maybe accumulate in the air more. And just a lot of other general fidelity things like that vary with the game that you're working on and the needs of it.
Sure.
Julian, I'm going to put down the game for a second and turn towards you. What you've just been through with me is a little bit monolithic, so thank you for staying with me. We've run through a lot of stuff. If this is actually your first time loading up Unreal, we have covered a lot of different tools. And I hope that we've done it in a way that really quickly connects the dots so you can always stay focused on what each one is doing. But realistically, like, not only have we started our very first project, learned how to navigate and play and use Unreal a little bit, we've also opened up and created an effect in Niagara. We've covered blueprints enough for you to be able to connect your own effect, your very first effect, into the game. We've gone into some relatively simple materials, but really the core of particle materials customly built so that we could make this awesome grenade effect. And then we actually made a pretty impressive, like really good feeling solid explosion effect hooked up to a grenade launcher, which explosions are one of the harder things to do in games.
I think we made it look fairly easy, though. As someone who's never done this before, like I felt pretty, and I'm hoping that you all who are watching it are able to kind of follow along with this and hopefully achieve a similar result.
Yeah, and I think you were able to challenge me on a lot of good questions, and I hope that we also dug enough into some of the background information of the whys and how, like, the fundamentals of what's actually working under the hood besides just pushing the right buttons. And then you actually, I think, particularly latched onto some of the more artistic components of it, like us talking about, never leaving your curves linear and really making sure that we're taking advantage of those animations to make things pop or to sell easing in and out.
Yeah, I think what became really apparent to me watching this as sort of playing the student role and as you all in the audience have sort of played that role as well as you're following along, I think they were really talking about two things. We're talking about the sort of knowledge of the tool, the interface knowledge, where to find certain parameters, what things are called, and how to adjust certain things. But there's also a whole element, I think, that's just the general principles of what makes an effect feel good. Yeah. And that felt like a really important part of this. And it felt like at every step of the way there was some sense of, like playing around with randomness or trying to use, or basically kind of, I don't want to say cheat, but creatively navigate the limitations of certain things like flipbooks and find ways to make that feel organic and real with a mind towards also keeping it optimized. We didn't dive super deep into that, but I think we did discuss the idea of things being expensive or not.
Right.
And so I feel like that's a part of it that I think was important to touch on. And if you're watching this series and you're going to go back through it to sort of follow along a little bit more slowly, or if this is your first time watching it, I think that's a good thing to pay attention to, is think through a little. Some of those principles as well are really, I think, are really, really valuable and important, just as much so as the knowledge of the actual tool itself.
Yeah, you're hitting on a point that we didn't really cover too much of, like what it means to be an effects artist. But my absolute favorite part of this entire profession is that every single new task that I make is a little bit of a puzzle, and it's a weird hodgepodge of like technical solutions with artistic output. And so I get to kind of flex both sides of my brain all the time. Sometimes it's insanely depressing and stressful because you're like, I have no idea how to do this, and then you overcome it, and there's the peak of just excitement of like, I can't believe I made something that feels that good and looks that good. That's amazing. So I guess I'm gonna throw you a tiny bit under the bus for this one. Julian, I'm going to ask you again, what is a VFX?
What is a VFX? What is a VFX, I think, is the more correct question. It's obviously an explosion.
That's right.
Actually, my personal definition of VFX is our rainbow unicorn sparkles that we made at the very beginning. But that's just my artistic sensibility.
Yeah. What do you think it means to be a VFX artist?
It's a good question. I feel like it's such a broad topic, but I think it's an interesting marriage, I'll say, of having having a technical knowledge and being able to understand the tools and the language and the sort of syntax of how these things are composed. But there's a whole separate category of it that, like you mentioned, is the artistic component of it. And I think those are two valuable, if I'm thinking about, my journey as a fledgling VFX artist here, or any of you out there who are watching and are just beginning your journey, it seems to me like there are these two very distinct pathways to be thinking about, and to make sure that you're seeking additional knowledge in both of those areas, like learn the tool better. But also, I think there's a lot of great resources on how to become artistically a little bit more interesting, or find more interesting art direction and be creative with that.
And I think one of my favorite parts is that depending on the genre of, like the artistic genre of game that you're working on, the techniques that we have to use to make that effect change wildly. So if we're working on a heavily stylized game, I'm not doing fluid simulations, but I still need to add motion and life to it. So I have to pick up a whole different set of tricks and tools. It's always different. There's no two projects, no two tasks really to run into that are the same.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this has been really interesting. It's very eye-opening, and it kind of opens up this whole interesting world where now it's like, kind of which way do you want to go to explore? Which is a topic we'll probably touch on in a future video a little bit more in terms of where you can go from here in your VFX education.
Yep. Okay. You think you can make one?
I want to try. I'll tell you that much. I don't know if I'll say I can make one, but I definitely want to try. I have some ideas.
Okay. Well, we're gonna take a break for a couple weeks and let you actually try to run through this, and I want to see if we've actually done a good enough job teaching it so that you, having been here with me through it, but also watching these recordings, are able to make your very own custom grenade explosion.
It would not be a Keith tutorial if it didn't come with homework. So
That's right. You know what? In fact, Jess, you've been behind the camera the entire time. Do you want to come on in here really quick?
Bring out our producer, Jess, who's right over here. She's been manning the camera for us, and we're gonna perhaps also have her.
Yeah, Jess, can I give you homework too? Do you want to take a crack at, at making your own?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm really excited. Thanks for sticking through it. If you guys want to see more of our educational content, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out our socials. All that is linked in the description below, as well as on our website, beyondfx.com. And we're continually publishing new resources for you guys to help you guys on your BFX journey. So check that out. And I guess Jess and I will see you on the next episode with hopefully a finished effect.
All right. Thanks for watching, everybody.